Hey gang, Scott here, doing some color grading today. I'm just doing some color grading on this photo. Figured I'd flip on the camera and share the technique I've been using to do my color grading, because I tend to work visually and I like to see what's happening and then dial things back and then tune in a look. So I thought I'd go through that today. I'll give you a quick brief intro into color grading because I've done a bunch of other videos about color grading, and there's lots of different ways to add tint and fine-tune color. The color grading tool is one of them, and that's what I happen to be using. So let me get you the intro to color grading, really brief, and then I'll show you the example, just so you can get a feel of how color grading is working. Here's the color grading tool. And you've got, the three different color wheels. I like to work with the larger ones: shadows, then midtones, then highlights. And again, I've done other videos on color grading in general. But for the shadows, you're picking a color. Let me just pick something that's almost complete red, and we can see that the shadows area and some of the lower midtones get affected. And then if you were to choose another tint in, let's do the midtones. Let me do a green right here. We see that transition. Now, if you remember, I had clicked a point over here on the reds, and then to the midtones, I'm basically doing a transition, like really the shortest path, the straightest line you can get to this green. If I go down in here, as the path's a little different, there's more muted colors in between, and so that materializes in the color grading, the gradient from what you've chosen in this case, shadows, to what I've chosen in midtones. I could continue that. Let's just kind of go around the color wheel and then into highlights, right? If I instead chose highlights, here, it's going to go straight across, right through. Now, if I chose here, it's kind of cutting through the middle here, so you're not getting these very vibrant or bright blues and greens somewhere in the middle. That's fundamentally how color grading works as far as the transitions. And then, of course, the sliders really control, here's the hue. What's the color that I want? Saturation, you'll see that dot move inward and outward. More color, less color. You can play around with luminance. I actually use that most of the time without any color, just to do a little midtone tweak if it's easier than doing curves. And then blending will, the transition, you can make it super smooth, super harsh, and balance. I want more colors from the shadows or more colors from the highlights. So that's the basics, the real quick and dirty basics of color grading. Let me show you a practical example of a photo and why I'm using color grading on it. Well, this photo I'm mostly done with. I've done my basics, my tone, I've done retouching, cropping. You can see all the little dots of the various things that I've fixed up on this photo. And it's just kind of color-wise, it's kind of flat. Nature didn't cooperate. The sun just escaped behind the clouds, and there wasn't going to be a good sunset or nice golden light on the beaches. And that's what I want to address with color grading. I can take this photo and make it a little bit more than what it is, with an appropriate level of color grading, really to add the mood. That's why I want to color grade. I want to add a little more warmth to this. And so let's open up color grading. And again, I like to work with the large wheels here. And I said warmth, and I'll start with the shadows. So I'm just going to click somewhere out very far at the edge. I'm really pushing saturation to 100%. I'm working with the sliders. And the reason I'm doing that is I can clearly see what's being affected and what hue I'm getting. And that actually where I landed was pretty good. That was right around 18 or 19, somewhere around there, something like that. Once I've got I like that color, I'll take the saturation way down, and just start to play a little bit to see, how much is right. And I'm moving the slider, but I'm watching the photo. My eyes are on primarily the beach, because that's, I'll push this back up to 100. That's where we were seeing most of the impact, and that's where I want this particular tone or hue to really be hitting there. And right around there feels good. And so already before and after. Before, you see that beach is still very, very cool. After, it's being warmed up again. Now for midtones and highlights, I want to do a variation of the theme. The mood that I want for this photo is relatively monochromatic, the warmer tones, the oranges and the yellows. So let's move on to midtones, and I'll do the same thing. I'll just kind of click out, we're kind of moving around the color wheel somewhere there, saturation to 100%, and let's see what that's really affecting, right? If I take saturation down to 0, it's like the underbelly of the clouds and the ocean primarily. So that's what I'll be watching when I start working both of these sliders. So hue, I'm close, and so I'm going to click on that slider, and now I'm just kind of rocking my finger back and forth on the trackpad, watching the sky. This gets too red already, so I don't want to go too much lower than here where I am. And then again, let's get the slider selected, eyes back to the photo, and now I'm dialing back in how much of this warmth do I want. And somewhere in this neighborhood is feeling good. I don't want to go overboard with these color gradings. I want hints and nuance of color. So now we've got shadows and midtones before and after. Looking nice. Now to round it out, we need to do the highlights. So we'll do the same thing. And I'm going to continue working my way around since I'm in the warm tones, somewhere in the yellow arena. And saturation up to 100%. Grab that hue slider. Now this is a really strong look. Actually what I should do again, 0, 100, kind of knew where it was going to hit, right? This area of the sky, a little bit in the reflections in the water, because that's where our highlights are. Get our hue slider, dial in the right, right being a relative term, a color that looks good to me, and then dial back its strength, click, and watching the photo now as I adjust this to decide where I want to end up. Around there. That feels good. So those three things, these color gradings, before and after, a much more inviting mood to the photo. And I guess the key takeaway, if there's a takeaway from this video besides, here's how Scott does color grading, it's what mood do you want to convey in the photo? In my case, it was to warm it up. In other cases, it might be a cool tone for the shadows and a warm tone for the highlights. That's a classic type of color grading. Then work shadows, midtones, highlights, crank the saturation up to 100%. At a minimum, it'll tell you what areas of the photo are going to be impacted by that color hue, and then dial things back once you've gotten the hue that you like. Repeat that for the midtones and the highlights. Hope you found the video useful. Got questions? Go ahead and drop them below. And until next time, my name is Scott Davenport. Have fun.